I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil.
Okay, welcome everyone back to the Reckless Musecast, TRM. We are joined today by a very special guest, Dr. Ashley Morgan, all the way from the land of castles and dragons in Wales. We are very happy to have her here, and she is the first official guest of TRM, so she's kind of a history maker in that sense. Dr. Morgan, I know you asked us to call you Ashley. I'm going to do my best. So Ashley, could you please, and she is a masculinities professor at the University of Cardiff Metropolitan University. There we go. Welcome to TRM.
Thank you for having me on. It's such a pleasure, Joe and Ben. Thank you for having me. It took us a while to organise this meeting. Because we're in 3 different time zones. So it's really quite nice. Really
Joe, what
nice.
time is it there?
It's 10 a.m. here in Los
10
Angeles.
a.m. Yeah,
10 a.m. Los Angeles. Where
1
are you,
p.m. and I'm in South Jersey. I say outside of Atlantic City. A lot of people know Atlantic City, for better or worse. I'm right around there. And you're in Cardiff, which is
where it's 18. We're on GMT here, so it's 1800 hours.
Yeah, I actually use that. I actually do use that on my phone from when I spent time in Europe, and I've just kind of kept it. I've just adopted that. I like it.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? So
Very
yes, thank
cool.
you for having me. The way in which I got about coming on this program was through a couple of weeks ago. I was putting my CV together for something, and I couldn't find one of my articles. So I went online and Googled myself, which is never a good thing to do. And I learned to my regret that sometimes it's a really bad thing to do, because what I found was last December, I wrote an article for a international journalist plus academic journal called The Conversation. There's conversations in every part of the world, and it's an attempt by The Conversation to get academics' interests and research out into the world in much more sort of everyday parlance and vernacular, because the academia is always criticised for not being understandable enough, shall we say? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but last year I wrote an article for a book chapter for the International Routledge Journal of Gender and Media, and I wrote a book chapter about Sherlock Holmes, the television series, the BBC Sherlock Holmes, and CBS's Elementary, and I looked at it through the lens of toxic masculinity. But Routledge were really bad at promoting the book. They were absolutely shit, and nobody knew it had come out. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about this? So I've had a couple of articles in The Conversation, which has generated a great deal of trolling, I have to say. So I contacted The Conversation and said, look, can I write something about Sherlock Holmes and toxic masculinity, because it hasn't been written about before? And they were like, oh, okay. They said, oh, it's going to be, it's going to be a difficult thing. And I said, yes, I have written about masculinity before, I understand. But what I didn't quite comprehend, and this is going to come as a massive shock to you, or it isn't, that how I did know, but I didn't think I quite knew how kids and animals, don't work with them, how beloved the character of Sherlock Holmes was. So I'd never read it because I'm a hideous pleb, and what I have done was watch a television series. The BBC television series was filmed around where I live, so you'd see them. It's the same with Doctor Who as well. Doctor Who is always filmed around.
You'd see
where
Benedict
I live.
Cumberbatch. You'd see
Sorry?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
I saw the one where I hadn't seen him. I've seen other people.
Okay.
And it was literally around the corner from where I live at one point. That was they were filming. It was when he comes back from the Reichenbach Falls one, and the character played by Jonathan Harris, that I can't remember, he's got a load of young people in a room, and they're all talking about what they think the answer is, and they like sort of they're like what do you call it, fiction characters, what do you call it, you know, when people make up their own stories about
like
fan fiction. Fan fiction.
Oh, fan fiction.
Yeah. It was like a whole fan fiction bit of that episode, and it was just around the corner, and then they were filming other stuff, and they filmed a lot of stuff around here. His Dark Materials.
Oh, cool.
It's all here. It's literally in a square mile of where I live. So there's always some filming going on. So, you know, I was like, oh, you know, Sherlock Holmes, around the corner, interesting. So and I started watching it, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Not least because I know nothing about the stories. I've never read them, but I thought, I like the contemporary feeling of it, because I've seen, I don't know, I mean, are you big Sherlock Holmes fans?
Yeah, I've read.
I think you are, Joe, aren't you?
Yeah. I've read all the stories though. Yeah.
Should we discuss how we all got together here? Should we? should I bring that up? How? No, because I
do that off camera.
I think that's a good thing, to be honest, and here's why. Because what initially happens, I think, thousands of times a day, every day on the Thunderdome, which is Twitter. And what we did was, you know, there was let's say a disagreement about this character and this topic between Joe and Ashley. And
it wasn't a disagreement.
It wasn't. It was a It was
a complete misreading of what I'd read. What I'd read. Fairness.
And that's fine.
Do you want me to comment on that?
I think we
sure.
should.
Yeah, sure,
but I do want to bring up how what I did was, Joe and I had been already talking at that point about starting a podcast, and I said, you know what? Let's have her on. Let's bring her on, because what happens all the time is that people get in arguments, and a lot of times it is exactly what you said, Ashley. It's a misreading, a misinterpretation, something like that, and then that's it. And both people, or all parties, whether it's a dog pile or just one-on-one, end up leaving, and they're just more angry. And I thought, well, let's bring people together. Let's bring us together. Let's talk about this topic, and maybe we don't learn anything from it, and that's fine. And it's just got good conversation, or maybe we see a different angle. And I think that's important, and I hope, and that's something that we plan to do with our podcast, not just people who guests who we necessarily agree with on everything, but who might shed light on a topic. Yeah,
and everybody says, oh yeah, I love that, and everybody says, oh yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, that's boring.
But one of the interesting things I thought is that is completely missed how much I really love the series. I think it's one of the, at the time of watching it, it started in 2015, didn't it? And I think at that time, it was one of the best things on television in a time before, in this country, you know, Netflix was still in its infancy. It really was. I don't think we had Netflix, but I mean, I didn't have it. You know, that doesn't mean to say other people didn't have it. But and I know in America, streaming services have been much more. You've had them for much longer. I think, you know, people in 2015, we were still watching DVD box sets.
Oh, really?
You know, and I was trying to download episodes of Angel I'd never seen off some illegal hooky site, you know. So, so one of the things that really struck me about how amazing the BBC Sherlock was its filmic production qualities. Given that, and they were deliberately an hour and a half long, I think, each episode, weren't they, to give it much more of a film emphasis. And what I think is interesting, you know, there's a couple of things that I absolutely adore about it, not least the chemistry between Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman. And
he plays Watson, right?
Yes, Martin Freeman plays Dr. Watson.
Yeah, and I'm not that familiar with the show. I actually think I saw a couple episodes while I did a study abroad in London in college, and I think we saw a little there. I like Benedict Cumberbatch a lot, and obviously I just know the character, the beloved character Sherlock Holmes, just from Dickens, right? Dickens wrote Sherlock?
I'm sorry, for Conan Doyle.
Oh, Conan Doyle. Okay, so I know him from that. Right, and so I'm familiar with him for that reason. And I think what happened was we started seeing these kind of new terms that have entered into the, I guess you call it social justice lexicon. I don't know if that's fair because that has a negative connotation, but things like toxic masculinity came out of the Me Too movement, which was huge here in America. I'm not sure if it was as big. No. So,
No.
so what,
okay.
when
Do you,
did,
want me to me to tell you the genesis of toxic masculinity?
Yes,
it's
definitely.
very clear to me that you and I have a lot of stick for it, and I didn't create it, right?
Sure.
No, of
I
course
just,
not. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rowan Connell, who's a very, very respected academic, Australian academic, in the 80s did the first real research on men. In the past, men and masculinities hadn't been considered important enough to research into and to look at and to think about, and then maybe enact changes or laws which helped men. And what Connell did was point out that hegemonic masculinity, which is the kind of masculinity, the exalted type, it's the white, what you call it in America, the WASP, the
Sure, yeah.
the white male privilege, the middle class man, the person with a lot of money behind them, who get themselves to the top. And the reason they get themselves to the top is because of all the sort of privilege that they have. And what Connell says, right, so hegemonic masculinity is like the top of a very interesting pyramid, okay? That's at the top. And then what happens is, in order for men to get there, they oppress other men. And they oppress women. And in the 80s, what Connell noticed in Australia, and then other people started picking this up around the world, was that men who were in prominent positions, whether they were white boys in a classroom who were 12-year-olds who were white, and they had black peers and gay peers and maybe peers with disabilities, they would oppress them. The white kids would oppress them in order to make themselves better. Okay, so Connell looked at that, and what he realized was that, and what he says very clearly, what she says now, I mean, is that there is not one kind of masculinity, and there never has been. And we talk about masculinity as if what we're talking about is every successful man. Yeah, and lots of men are oppressed, unsuccessful, struggle. Male suicide, particularly in the UK, is at an all-time high between the ages of 19 and 23. Mental health is really bad amongst men. And Connell said this is a massive problem because men aren't just oppressing women. We know that because that's the patriarchy, and you can't get away from that. You don't have to like it, but that is the way it is. So out of this, Connell talks about men's toxic practices. And what that is are the way in which men oppress other men and women. And toxic practices are things like talking over other people, not listening to people, not being emotional, or having the only emotion that you're allowed to have is anger. And that anger as well is very much validated throughout society. Yeah, in Europe at the moment we've got football on, yeah. And England is going into tomorrow the cup final of the European. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, the Euro 2020.
It's very important. And what will happen is the team that doesn't win, men will and other people will enact a lot of anger, and whatever happens, whether people get hurt, whether things are ripped up, whatever, their anger will be validated because of their masculine status. And that will be expected to happen. And we know it'll be expected to happen because there will be police. It'll be all policed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So toxic masculinity is about pushing other people down.
Like punching down, I think we would say.
Yeah, what would you call it?
Like punching down is a term used a lot here.
Right. And what do you see? You know when people speak over other people and don't let them talk.
Yep.
Is that what is that called something?
It is associated with toxic masculinity here in the U.S. Like that. That's one of the symptoms of it, I guess.
But that's what Connell would say it was. But it was also about not being emotional and not caring. and being
Sure.
sort of disassociated from emotion.
So I
And-
think that brings us into, like, in your Sherlock piece, is the term asceticism?
Asceticism,
Yeah, asceticism, where it's this, I guess I would call it like stoicism in a way. And is that
it's more than stoicism.
okay?
Because stoicism is a fairly, I mean, both stoicism and asceticism are very traditional arms of philosophical living and inquiry,
Mhm.
aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what do you want to say about asceticism?
Well, so I think that ties it back into, so what I was saying before is toxic masculinity, I think, entered at least the US common vernacular after Me Too. I'm not saying it didn't exist
Okay.
before then. I think the term, I don't remember hearing it ever before 2015,
Yeah,
2014, around that time. Doesn't mean it didn't exist or even the term had been coined in the 80s, like you said. But I think that's what I meant, is that now it's used all the time. And like so many words, they take on different meanings depending on who's using them. And I think what happened was we saw it used with a beloved literary figure like Sherlock, and there was the reaction to it because Sherlock seems so, I think what you just described as toxic masculinity is not what I think most people here would consider it. Like talking over people maybe, but not like being emotionless, I think is actually not what most people would consider here. Would be so emotional that it gets violent. And I think a lot of that is more associated with like domestic violence or just violence, and it could be against men or women.
And one of the, sorry, I didn't really explain that very well, but one of the ways other people use to describe sort of practices that are toxic are things like high school shootings and road rage.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I remember I gave a talk in a school a couple of years ago about toxic masculinity, and I found this amazing video where somebody got out of two men somewhere in America. One of them sort of tries to cut the other one up. They both stop. One of them gets out, pulls the guy out of the car and beats the shit out of him.
Sure.
Probably tries to kill him,
Right.
because he tried to cut him up on the freeway.
Yeah.
So that would be an example of toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that I think is an example that most people would 100% agree with.
And you know, sort of going back to Sherlock, really.
Yeah.
Things like so Sherlock's brother saying to Mrs. Hudson, "Oh, shut up, Mrs. Hudson. You know, quiet down now, woman. There are men in the room." Yeah.
Okay.
And then you know, Sherlock says, "Don't say that to Mrs. Watson. Though do in fact shut up." He says, and it's like, and also, you know, the way women in Sherlock, even Adler, in the representation, in you know, even the woman who's the policewoman, he just rips into her.
Mm-hmm.
And no, he oppresses everyone, in fairness, but again, that's an example of toxic masculinity, to oppress everyone.
Right.
Sure.
To elevate yourself.
I get that. So in this, I mean, Sherlock obviously is fictional, but let's say for argument's sake, or even in his world, he's very much real and phenomenal at what he does, right? Like he's the best, he's exceptional.
As a detective, yeah.
Can you separate the two? Is that just a sign of, like, would he be as good at his job if he didn't act that way?
Well, it's a bit like House, isn't it?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, House was quite a, you know, he's an interesting, again, I mean, he's based on Sherlock Holmes, isn't he?
Right.
But one of the things, for me, one of the things is men are allowed to get away with this behavior all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Women don't even come into the equation at all. And I think if started to behave in that way, you know, would be called a bitch or a ball breaker or, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't be allowed to have that, "Oh, but she's a genius, it's all right. It's all right, she's a genius."
Yeah, I could see that double standard. I definitely think that exists.
And also, I think that takes us on quite nicely to Elementary.
Okay,
as
I'm not as
well.
familiar with it. I know Lucy Liu plays Watson,
Watson,
or
Yes.
Watson. Okay.
So I can't remember in my conversation article that you commented on, Joe, if I talked about Elementary in that. But because but in my book chapter, I do, because
Okay.
I look at the two shows and I look to see the ways in which the toxic masculinity is present and how it is present. And it's in the BBC Sherlock, it's very present in verbal, but also physical gestures. Where in, so in the BBC Sherlock, he does things like he slams the door in people's faces and says, "I'm bored." Yeah, and he's all very, ooh. And also, I mean, you might, being American, you might not get the class thing, which is, he's upper class, so he can basically do what he likes.
Sure.
Right.
It doesn't matter because he's a posh bloke.
Yeah.
But in the American version, I think it's a much more interesting character, but also, the whole really interesting Furry about having a female sidekick was absolutely bonkers. And people were really, really angry about it. And I just thought, oh, this is brilliant. I love Lucy Liu. Isn't she great? There she is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's a medical doctor. She's a medical doctor too, she's
right.
But also I feel the female characters in Elementary are, like many female characters, are just very, very one-dimensional. And what do they end up doing? Looking for love. He's having sex in Elementary,
right?
Because it feeds his mind.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm having sex. That's fine. It feeds my mind. And if she is, he's like, oh, you're out having sex. You be careful. And it's like, really?
And that's one of the biggest double standards. I don't think anyone could really argue with, is that a man who sleeps with a lot of women is a
stud.
player, a Lothario, a stud.
He feeds his mind, you see. What does he say? He says something like, "I have to have it because it feeds. It doesn't just. It feeds my body instead of my
Gets the juices
mind,
flowing.
and I need that taken care of."
Sure.
In a very that would have been a very Victorian thing to do.
Right.
Interestingly, although Elementary is really contemporary, actually some of the things in terms of what the character does, like having sex with prostitutes, is a very Victorian thing.
So that actually brings me, you kind of brought up a topic I wanted to discuss. Are you aware of the Bechtel Test?
No.
The Bechtel Test. Okay, so I'll go over really quickly. It was created by a woman cartoonist named Alison Bechtel. Basically, there are 3 rules for the Bechtel Test. It's one, and this is really for films. I guess it could be applied to shows, but it's really for films. It has to have at least 2 named women in it who talk to each other about something other than a man. It sounds very, very simple, right? It sounds like most movies would pass this. Here, I have a list of movies here just from 2020 that did not pass the Bechtel Test.
Right.
These include Oscar winners, very progressive movies. I'm doing quotes here: Judas and the Black Messiah, Mortal Kombat, not progressive, but these are just new movies. Mortal Kombat, Honey Boy, Mank, The Trial of the Chicago 7, and this one's my favorite that I don't think was fair, is A Quiet Place, that didn't really have any talking in it, but still it did not pass the Bechtel Test, which to me is just wild, because if you had asked me, if you had read me those 3 rules and said what movies didn't pass this, besides A Quiet Place, because there's not really any talking in it, what movies wouldn't pass? I think they all passed. Just 2 named women talking to each other as something other than a man. And I was shocked to find that those movies, I think 3 or 4 of them were Oscar nominees, did not pass it. What are your thoughts on this test?
Well, first of all, what is the Oscar system?
What is the Oscar system?
I know what it is.
Oh, the Academy. Academy nominates movies.
It's one of the interesting things I think about the Oscar system is Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the way in which his films, for better or worse, always were Oscar nominated because he did so much background championing. It's not about what's the best film. It's like who's got the most money to throw.
Sure, it's lobbying. Yeah, it's lobbying.
It's lobbying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I think about the Bechtel system? I think it's brilliant, but it's just I think basically one of the problems with patriarchy is that it doesn't notice what's absent. And often what is absent are people of color, people with disabilities, women, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, I find it really interesting because I cannot watch something that doesn't have at least one female character in it because I find it really boring otherwise.
Okay.
And what is really interesting, if you see lots of there are lots of films with male-only casts. If you look at a film like Master and Commander, for example,
Sure.
is there even, I'm just trying to think, is there even a woman in it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, and to defend Master Commander, I don't think women were allowed on ships, right?
I know, then why make a film about men?
Well,
I mean, you know, like in a
what
war movie,
happens?
for example, you know, in war films, especially historical war films, where, you know, like Saving Private Ryan or something like that. I mean, it's
I think historical movies have to get a pass, and also I mean, we're gonna get a little off topic here, but my personal opinion is not every film has to be like completely representative of the society as a whole. I think diversity is great, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. I know Dunkirk got a lot of flack because it was like, oh, it's British Empire, you know, nostalgia, where all the Black and Indian soldiers. It's like, well, first of all, there were some Black soldiers in the French army. There weren't really many at all at Dunkirk historically.
Right.
And there actually was some representation of Indians, but like that's just historical accuracy to put.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
But also, what that does, and I've seen it here as well. What that does is, when you see Black actors, they're just acting, and they can act whatever character in the way the white actors can, but they're always generally cast as Black people rather than just somebody who's acting a role.
Sure.
And we've had this in this country with it's very good. There's a series on somewhere about Anne Boleyn, one of Henry VIII's wives.
Yeah, she got her head cut off.
Well, yes, you probably know my kids could sing you the song, sort of divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, or something.
Yeah.
So she was one of the beheaded ones. And and the character is played by a Black actress who is acting on the screen, and what you see is Anne Boleyn. So I mean, yes, and we are going slightly off topic. I completely understand that.
No, and I think that's fine too. For artistic purposes, remember that's what this podcast is about. If you want to make for instance, I know that they remade, they were putting it on in, this is random, in New York City, a play, Julius Caesar basically, but it was more the story of Malcolm X, and it was just kind of replaced Julius Caesar with Malcolm X. It was all Black cast. I know that, for instance, I'm a huge fan of Les Miserables. It's my favorite play. I love the movie. I love the play. I've seen it on Broadway. And I know that the BBC series had, is it David Oleo? I'm going to butcher his name.
David Oleo.
Yeah, Oleo. I think he was playing Javert, who a Black man would not be the chief inspector of Paris or whatever it was back in the 1830s.
He's just an actor.
But he's just an actor, and I think that's great too, right? So it goes both ways. If you want to make, and I would actually argue that most of the time, a minority actor replaces a white character, traditionally white character, instead of the reverse. Nowadays, look at the Green Knight. The Green Knight is Arthurian legend. The actor from Slumdog Millionaire is playing the Green Knight, or excuse me, not the Green Knight. He's playing Sir Gawain, who fights the Green Knight. Yes, Dev Patel. Yeah, Dev Patel.
He was also in a Dickens film.
Sure, and I think that's fine. More of my, and then I do want to get back to what we're going to talk about. More of my gripes is when Hollywood, especially, is so lazy that they just change the race of a beloved character instead of creating something new. For instance, Little Mermaid and Ariel, just making her Black because they're too lazy to make their own Black fantasy, their own Black story, which they have done before, like, Princess and the Frog and Black Panther and all these other situations.
Princess Tiana.
Right. So they can do it. It's just they're so lazy. It's like,
Moana as well.
Yeah, Moana, exactly. So it can be done, but a lot of times it's like, oh, well, we want to use this IP because it makes money, and we're just going to change. And I feel like you're doing a disservice to whatever race you're trying to actually please, and you're pissing off people who love that character. Who Ariel's a Danish, a Danish folklore tale. So
Right.
I don't know. But getting back to
Sorry, I've got a hamstring
okay.
injury, so I'll just.
I'm sorry to
Yeah,
hear.
no problem.
Hamstrings are the worst.
I
I
know.
wanted to get into. I really enjoyed and kind of anticipated the piece you wrote on legacy. No, excuse me. Let me get the exact title right here. From emo kid to stylish cheek and back again, Maddie Healy and hybrid masculinity. I'm very interested in this topic. I'd love to.
You liked that, did you?
I did, and I did anticipate that because I had I even I could share my screen. I won't because it has my notes, and I had I think
Got swears on it.
Probably we are a non-PC podcast, so I think if you heard last episode, we're both trying to not swear on this episode just out of a courtesy. But last episode we were swearing like sailors.
I love swearing. I think there should be more of it.
I actually
Go for it then.
I find
fucking women swearing.
Yeah, go for it. That's fine.
I think the British, you consider yourself British? I know it gets sticky.
No, I'm Welsh. I'm a Welsh person.
Only Welsh. I know it's not. I know English and Welsh are very different, but British. Not now. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm British on my passport.
British on your passport, right? I'm actually one quarter English, so yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's got to come from somewhere, haven't they?
Everybody's got to come from somewhere. Yeah. So I had added a note on Motley Crue and just those kind of bands because they are, to me, the biggest. What's the word? The biggest kind, like they're dressed in tights and this long flowing hair. Glam rock. But then they're the most womanizing men of human history. I will put money on it. They're like Motley Crue, Aerosmith,
Bon Jovi.
Bon Jovi,
New
Poison,
Jersey represent.
Warren.
Yeah.
Bon Jovi.
You don't like Bon Jovi? Oh, it's fantastic.
Nice.
Anyway, so I wanted to bring up
What's
this.
that awful one? I'm thinking of that's Green Day, isn't it? What's the awful one? It might be Motley Crue. The lead singer with the
that's Poison.
Axl Rose.
Yeah. Oh, Axl Rose. It's Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, Guns N' Roses.
Are you thinking of is it?
No, I'm thinking of Guns N' Roses.
Oh, you think of Guns N' Roses?
I'm thinking of, yeah.
Yeah. So
you were thinking about Motley Crue when you're reading my paper?
I thought of that before even reading your paper, just bringing up the concept of masculinity and clothing in music.
It's a really interesting thing, I think, because and there, in the paper I say it's not unusual for men to dress up as women because there's a big tradition of it through Shakespeare.
I had that note right here. I was going to ask, doesn't this go back to Shakespeare?
It does.
Go ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, where women weren't allowed to act, so young boys would act the female role, and because women weren't allowed on stage. Also in Australia has had a very big drag movement. So if you've ever seen films like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Strictly Come, I think there's a film called Strictly Come Dancing. There's Strictly Ballroom. There's quite a lot of like drag type stuff, but and I think that's what glam rock is. Glam rock is very draggy, but what the people like Motley Crue and Bon Jovi, and there's a lot written about masculinity and rock bands, and particularly metal, and and the placing of the guitar and that as like a penis extension. There's a lot of that.
Absolutely.
But it just strikes me that how relentlessly heterosexual they are, like Motley Crue, as you said, and if you look at somebody like Led Zeppelin, I mean, really long hair, just chest, absolutely egregious women chasers.
Oh, yes. And that's why, so you bring up, and it's on page 114, you bring up Bowie, who you say is, I believe, I have a quote here, I'm assuming it's you, most androgynous and apparently bisexual, and then I want to bring up Harry Styles also, because I know he was in the news recently for wearing dresses on the cover of Vogue, I believe it was. And I think you hint at this.
Kid Cudi.
Was it Kid Cudi also? Oh,
Kid Cudi and Post Malone as well.
Okay. Now here's my thing.
Go on.
I think you can wear whatever you want, right? I'm
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
fine with that.
Sure.
Don't you think it's all, my thing is this. If you want to go on stage and wear a dress like I think Matt Healy does in the 1975, the band that you really profile in your piece, that's totally cool. That's art. But where it starts to get preachy, and I think that's where it's changed now. It used to be people like Bowie, they would put on this, you know, he literally had a new persona, he's the Thin White Duke, as you know, that's androgynous and it's fun and it's artsy, but that's a character. Now it sounds like more of people like Harry Styles who were preaching that you should be doing this also. Maybe not in those exact words, but it should just be acceptable for the average man to wear dresses, when really Harry Styles could throw back on a suit and he'd still be gorgeous and rich and famous, and he doesn't have to pay the
Sort
you
of
know,
the social
pay the toll for doing that, for being a champion of something that he can just recede from. And I think that's my bigger issue with this. It's not anymore about the stage name or the stage persona. It's like, this is what you should be doing in your everyday life.
Okay. It's interesting that you look at it in that way, because from my research, people I know and research and, you know, looking at it in the whole way, because I am a masculinity scholar, whatever the fuck that means, is that, and I'm going to use the word problematic, and I'm going to fucking own it as well, Joe, okay?
All right, yeah, that's fine. Go for it.
The idea that lots of men would like to wear different clothes. Society doesn't like it when they do that. I don't know what it's like in America. In Britain, if you are from a small town and you're thinking, right, I'm going to the Walmart, you know, equivalent,
Yep.
and I'm going to put on a nice dress because it's nice, and I'm going to wear it to Walmart, it's quite likely you get beaten up because other people don't like it. They find it stressful. It's not about drag. It's a man wearing women's clothing. And that's where the problem comes. It's not about men preaching, oh, you can do whatever you like, because that's an old thing. David Bowie did, as you say, David Bowie did that. Bloody minstrels in medieval times did that. That's all fine. The problem comes from, you know, if you're a rock star, as you say, you can do whatever you like. And as you say, you're normally fairly good looking. You know, Kid Cudi in the dress for, it was for Kurt Cobain's birthday, wasn't it? This year, sometime in February.
Yeah, and he famously wore a wedding dress? Or
it wasn't a way, it was designed for him, and it was meant to reflect. What is really interesting is that nobody ever remembers that Kurt Cobain was such a rampant feminist and was very, very against homophobia. And, you know, they didn't want people who were homophobic to come to their shows, and they would say that, but he's never remembered for that. And I always find that really interesting, but he did used to wear women's clothing occasionally. And again, lots of men did in the late 80s. He's not the only one. Evan Dando's another one from the Lemonheads. And the guy in my paper who's from a Welsh band called the Manic Street Preachers, Nicky Wyatt. So the problem is when you're a pop star and you're on stage and, you know, you're looking hot, blah, 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 you can wear whatever you like.
Right.
You know, and Iggy Pop wore see-through trousers, you know?
Yeah.
And that was great because he was a fucking pop star.
Exactly.
Of course he was a pop star. Yay! You want to see rock stars in clothes like that.
Sure.
I went to see the 1975 and I was like, I'm going to kick off with this no skirt at all. I was like, devastated. Oh my God, the most looking people came on stage. I was like, fucking hell, man. Where's the drama? Where's the excitement? No. So I don't think anybody means to be preachy. The problem is, as rock stars, you can wear what you like. The problem, though, is when you're Ben, you want to pop down to Walmart, you've got a really nice skirt that you like, you pop it on, and some bloke takes you out and punches you because he doesn't like you wearing the skirt because it's worrying and unusual for him.
Yeah, and of course
I can do that. I can do that in LA. That's okay here in LA.
I think the answer to your question is I would think is very similar.
100%.
They're very tolerant cities where I lived in. I brought this up last. I lived in New Orleans for a few years, and it's totally normal to see people wearing. I remember I got on the streetcar and there would be a man in like a Bo Peep outfit, just either because he felt like wearing it or he was an actor or something like that. My brother would come down for what's called the red dress run, and you would wear red dresses, and in New Orleans you could drink publicly anywhere, but it was a big thing. And I said, Teddy, you can come down, you don't have to come down for that, just come down whenever you want and wear a red dress. No one cares. You want to wear a dress, you can wear a dress. You don't have to come for this one festival. But then in maybe some small towns in America, you would, I think getting attacked, I don't know if there'd be a guarantee of that, but getting slurs or something yelled at you, I think would probably happen.
Or
but,
just people drawing attention to you.
Right.
Sure.
But you know, London's the same. You can look, you know, I've seen naked people in London.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And London is a big metropolitan city. Where
course.
I'm from and where I live, men don't like me with short hair, and they shout at me.
Do they really?
Because they don't like it. Because I look like, what do they call me? A man-hating lesbo. And I've had short hair all my adult life, and I'm a happily married woman to a man. But I look like a fucking man-hater. Because in where I live, it's very conservative. All the women have long hair and all the men have short hair.
Okay.
And anybody in between, or I am literally, in my kids' school, I'm the only woman with short hair, the only parent, the only female parent with hair that's short. Because hair is a symbol of feminine beauty.
Sure.
Whether we agree with it or not, whether we like it or not, we generally believe it is.
Sure.
So anybody who hasn't got that conforming hair is problematic because they're outside of the norm.
Right.
Yeah. And norms. And I think in America, there are norms as well. It isn't just a British thing.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, as you say, you know, New Orleans is a party town, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And LA, you know, literally, if you're on the beach, I mean, who hasn't seen all sorts?
So I don't think so. I know that that's a big thing in Europe compared to the US is either nude beaches or topless beaches. I don't know if they're ever, I've been to a couple in Spain, but I do know
Wales as well.
in Wales. Okay. I don't think it's nearly as common in the US. I do know maybe in California. I don't know, Joe, you can speak to California.
You in California, but yeah, they're still not that popular.
Yeah.
It's all a bit Fire Island, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think a lot goes on at Fire Island.
And a bit Burning Man, isn't it? You know.
Oh yeah. I mean, anything goes at Burning Man.
Yeah. So I wanted to. Oh, sorry. Were you talking there, Ben?
No, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, okay. So Ben, you brought up an interesting point about how, you know, when you have a lot of like male pop stars, sort of, you know, they'll embrace, you know, sort of, you know, like dresses and things like that. And it's like, that's fine, that's cool. And you bring up a good point about how it's like, yeah, like they can get away with it because they're rich and famous and attractive, they can do it. And I also kind of agree with you where, you know, it's not so much that there's pressure from male pop stars who do this thing for the average male to start dressing like a female, but there's a little bit of this sort of condescension of like, well, I'm challenging the norms of masculinity, where it's like you have to go out. And so there's this sort of thing where it's like whenever, and it's not just that, whenever I hear a celebrity talking about what the average person should do, it's just kind of like, yeah, shut up, you're a millionaire, you live in a mansion.
Yeah,
but
that's part of it.
Yeah, but actually, you brought up an interesting point. And so Judas Priest is one of my favorite heavy metal bands. And they were one of the first metal bands to really start doing like the whole leather and chains thing. And it's funny because heavy metal has always been, it's funny because heavy metal has always been a very like masculine, hetero thing. But it's like the lead singer, Rob Halford, is gay. And what a lot of, I guess I would say just ignorant like fans, they probably didn't really know that much about gay culture. So like when they started going to concerts, dressing up in leather and studs and and metal and stuff, they didn't realize that came from sort of the gay underground subculture. And I'm fine with that. I'm like, that's cool. Like if it works, go for it. But I think one of the things that Judas Priest did differently than say like Harry Styles is that they just did it. They didn't go out and try to say, hey, we're trying to challenge masculinity. It's like they just did it, and then a lot of people liked it and they went with it. There was no message. There was no pontificating.
No,
so
but also the thing about you. Sorry, I don't want to go off there.
That's
talking
fine.
about Rob Halford,
Mm.
you know, how much did he talk about being out and being gay?
I think he came out in like the early 90s, but before that, they'd been playing for like 15 or 20 years. So
Yeah,
he didn't really talk much about being gay.
No,
Yeah.
and you know, bands like Black Sabbath and all that kind of thing, they
Hells
were
yeah.
very much held up, you know, for their womanizing.
Right.
So Rob, you know, Rob Halford is brilliant, absolutely.
Yeah.
But wasn't out like people are now. Also, social media, I think, has a massive impact, and media platforms. And Harry Styles, I mean, I don't know. I mean, One Direction. I mean,
it's
you know,
like,
I got nothing to say about them at all.
No.
It's more of.
Go on.
Sorry, Ashley. I was just gonna say
it's okay.
he you know, had. I would have given Harry Styles, for instance, and I don't mean to rip on him, I actually like him, a lot more credit if he was, you know, he wasn't saying that when One Direction was getting off the ground floor, right? Then he was he was like the Backstreet Boys of Britain then, right? So it's kind of like, well, you already made this foundation. You really have no skin in the game anymore. Now you go and you start wearing dresses on Vogue, and it's, I don't know, it seems very, I think Joe kind of nailed it, actually. It's more of just another celebrity. Maybe it was this past year, this past 15 months of celebrities just being very tone deaf and not connecting with like the average person at all.
Do you know what I think? I think it's more than that. I think it's stylists. And also, I think it's stylists pushing clothes, because two examples, Styles on the cover of Vogue and Inside and Kid Cudi, they both looked fucking terrible. How can you make Kid Cudi look bad? I was embarrassed. I was like, oh God, the man could wear a bin bag and look fantastic. The straps were wrong. The dress was wrong. There were a lot, you know, and in my mind, I was like, he should have gone halter. Should have had a halter neck, you know, with his, you know, with shoulders. And the same with Harry Styles. Harry Styles looks terrible in those Vogue magazines. The clothes don't fit him. They're horrible colors. He just looks like a child. And I'm like, what, you know, it's so unedifying. It's so not anything at all, I think.
Do you find it?
He looks crap. Make him look good. What can it be?
I want to go back to real quick, because I did take notes, so I want to get to them. I really, like I said, I really like this
exam
piece.
later, mine.
Yeah, I really like this piece, and I find it very ironic that, like you brought up Kurt Cobain, who I think you call it anti-fashion, like anti-corporate, anti-fashion stances, which I like. That was the
grunge look of the 90s.
Yeah. And I find that, and then you say, I think also ironically, because a woman murdered him, and we'll leave that conspiracy for another day, but that, Courtney Love, 100%. Courtney Love murdered Kurt Cobain, 100%, but we'll move on from that. That he was very much a feminist. And I find that very, very ironic, because his fashion was a backlash to the 80s glam, which is very, they were very womanizing, but dressed in, like we said, the halter tops and the spandex and makeup and all of that. So I do find that very ironic.
Do you mean like the point I make about Duran Duran?
Yeah,
the same thing. Is that what you're saying? Who American people hated Duran Duran because they called them faggots, and because one of the things I think Duran Duran did was look good in makeup and clothes.
Sure.
And there seems to be a, you know, with Harry Styles and the Kid Cudi, it's like they're not allowed to look good. They're not allowed to wear makeup that makes them look good. And same with Kurt Cobain, he just put on an old dress. Yeah, and just wore it. Right. With all his, you know, he's quite an insanitary creature, wasn't he? But the point I'm making is that it's hard for men to look nice. Pop stars try their best, and I find it really interesting that you feel it's quite preachy, because really, you both got your own style. Why would you give a fuck about Harry Styles as well? I mean, he's about 23 as well. He's not like,
I don't.
You know, he's not of any of our age group.
Yeah, no, he's not.
Right.
or
No.
anyone to look up to,
Right.
you know.
But he still has a lot of I felt the same way, and it doesn't even have to be, and I've said this before, so I can get personal with, I would try I think we all went through phases, maybe in middle school, high school, even college, where we would try something out, and it's really, you're putting yourself out there, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I was real into Esquire and GQ and these sorts of magazines in college, and I remember I went through this phase where I would try something as innocent as like rolling the cuffs, like cuffing my ankles, like cuffing the pant leg to my ankles, and I got ripped on and I got made fun of, and I saw, because why did I do that? Because I saw it in these men's like, this is GQ, Esquire, these like men's fashion magazines that are very credible and look up to. And then I looked back, I'm like, these are extremely good looking men who can get away with anything. I don't even know if they're dressing like this in real life, but this is saying like, oh, this is what you have to do for summer of 2012 is to cuff the pant legs to so you can show your boat shoes or whatever the hell it was, right? So then when I see people like Harry Styles doing that, like he is influencing some 19-year-old or 22-year-old in London or maybe in a small town in middle America. And that kid is gonna, go put a dress on and really get made fun of, and Harry Styles isn't going to have to face any of those repercussions.
No, and that is also part of my research about how pop stars, and traditionally they never have, they don't take any of the rap. I mean, what is interesting, I think, is Matty Healy does, because he's a bit of a twat as well. But I quite like that about him.
Sure.
He puts his hand up, says, "All right, I am a twat. It's okay, people." But Harry Styles is rather more serious, isn't he? Because he wants to be serious. He wants to be an actor. But
Harry Styles, who's in Dunkirk, by the way, so he plays like the rugged man, soldier. And I am interested in this concept they brought up. So one, hybrid masculinity, and also I think you have a feminizing the male. And I do want to talk about, because I think Joe and I are around the same age, and emo was a huge part of my formidable years. I can't speak for Joe. He grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in northern New Jersey, outside New York City. And emo was huge in the mid 2000s when I was, 14, 15, 16. You bring up, I don't know if you brought up My Chemical Romance.
Yes.
I think you did. They were huge, from New Jersey.
The paper's dedicated to my 15-year-old godson.
Okay.
And he is My Chemical Romance, apparently, according to him. And I am first on the list to take him to go and see My Chemical Romance when they come to Britain, because he's old enough to go now. But I gave a talk in March, and I'll send it to you if you want. It's just me standing there talking about hybrid masculinity and skirts. And I made him watch it, and he turned to his brother and he said, "You better get those fucking bands right." And I was like, "Young man, are you kidding me?"
Right.
As if I know nothing about popular culture at all. And I would not know anything about emo bands. Sure. I only know academically, and I quite like some of them too. But it was so funny. It was like, 15-year-old.
And I feel like at least my group of friends, and growing up, I was an athlete, and I wouldn't say preppy, but just jockey. Yeah, sure. Not to the stereotype bullying type, but I remember making fun of the music video Helena, which is My Chemical Romance, and it was like their first big hit. I watch that video all the time now, and I love it. I love the song. I love the video. I love the style. And Mike, I think it's Mikey Way. He kind of has these effeminate kind of movements with his hands and things like that. And I think it's great. And I remember openly mocking it when I was in high school. I think it came out in 2006. Around that time, I was 16. And I think now, at least I see with a lot of friends, we're almost like, now we're in our late 20s, early 30s, and we put on music videos when we're drinking and hanging out, and it's fun, and we sing the songs and stuff, and it's almost like, well, we couldn't enjoy it back then because it was so different and odd. And we made fun of, at least in my school, there was a direct correlation between emo and skateboarding. Like, only the emo kids skateboarders, only the skateboarders were emo kids. I don't know, Joe, if that was your experience. We didn't really have that separate skate culture, but California is totally different. It's where like skateboarding comes from. But and that was a bad association. So I don't know. I just found I find it very interesting that now it's almost like, well, we're not in high school anymore, and we can actually enjoy this stuff and be open about enjoying it. And you know, the hairstyles and it's fun. Like it's very fun.
I mean, what is quite nice is that my 15-year-old godson can enjoy it and be weird in high school, actually, probably because of the fact that it's a bit more acceptable.
Right.
Sure.
Now, I guess. I played him, there's a band called Camper Van Beethoven. I don't know if you know of them.
I've heard of them, yeah.
They, I think, late 80s. And they were, my godson is into a band called the Front Bottoms. And he's got like a load of, which is in Britain is really fucking rude.
Yeah.
Is it rude in America?
Sorry, can you repeat that? What's it?
Sorry, so there's a band called the Front Bottoms.
Sure. Oh, I don't
know. No, I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with
Oh, okay. So in Britain, it's really rude.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's about women's vaginas.
Oh, okay.
They just called themselves basically
vaginas. Sure.
Right.
But you know, in a sort of funny, boyish way.
Right,
you know,
right.
Haha, be funny. So, but he loves the Front Bottoms, and because you know, why wouldn't you with a name like that when you're 15?
Yeah,
of course. Yeah, absolutely.
But they sound very much like Camper Van Beethoven, which, if you haven't heard, there's a fantastic song called "Take the Skinheads Bowling." Anyway, anyway, it's very good. Very good. But I played in that and he was like, oh my God, you know, it's really good. But what is nice is I think he's, for all his, you know, and he does look like a vampire. He's very pale. He doesn't go out at all because he stays in watching video games and playing video games with people in Australia. And, but he's a massive My Chemical Romance fan.
Yeah.
And, but also things are a bit easier for him in school because he is clearly an emo kid. He clearly is. Right. You know. And that, and in Britain, I don't know what it's like in America now. In Britain, all the kids look the same. You know,
and how's that?
Subcultural impact has absolutely gone. There is none anymore. It's really interesting. I don't know what it's like. Is it still like that? Is it like that in America now? Basically, all the girls have got long hair, and all the boys have got short hair.
I would say. I mean, I think there's always, for instance, there's like punk in the 70s and 80s, and now we have literally, it's called pop punk, like it's pop punk music, and I love it too, but it shows that like
Green Day and stuff like that.
Pop punk, like Blink-182, I say was one of the most famous. It's still considered punk, but it's not anything like
cancer, isn't he?
Who's that? Oh, Mark Hoppus. Yeah, he does have cancer. Yeah, that's a shame. I have a couple more things I want to bring up from this piece, and then I do want to talk a little about the. I know we're running low on time, about the Kingsman piece.
Okay.
But so Matt Healy, I didn't know about this band. I listened to a little, not for me, but that's fine, right? You have this on this page 118. You say Healy's persona embodies very gay straight men adopting elements of homosexuality in order to distance themselves from the confines of straight hegemonic masculinity whilst disassociating themselves from homosexuality. My question is, why?
Okay, so that is what hybrid masculinity is defined as.
Okay, so
hybrid, go on.
No, sorry, go ahead, Ashley. My bad.
So what that is men who, it's like, I don't know what it's like in America, but in the UK at the moment, there's lots of men have suddenly grown massive beards.
Yeah,
like
we got
proper Tolstoy ones.
I feel like we went through that in like the early 2010s, right? Like the hipster.
There's a lot of that here in LA. There's a lot of that here.
It's monstrous over here now. Literally.
Tolstoy beards.
You can't pick them out of a lineup.
Yeah.
They all look the same as well. Anyway, no, it's hilarious. But what's my point about beards?
Well, so you were bringing up hybrid masculinity, and
hybrid
I think
right.
So Bridges, who is, I think maybe you're quoting someone named Bridges. I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Justin Bridges,
who it is.
Yes, a very eminent sociologist.
But to me, doesn't this beg the question that like heteronormative masculinity is like not in fact hegemonic? If these stars can kind of use it as a way to gain success and popularity.
The thing is about Healy in the paper is, and what he does is he flirts with gayness.
Sure.
Which guarantees him a massive female audience because he seems all cute and sweet.
Yep.
And he does the whole, you know, big eyes, big puppy eyes, and the whole.
Yeah.
And but also it gives him a gay audience,
Right.
where people feel comfortable with him. So the idea of hybrid masculinity is that men can take on and put off things that they like about another culture, like gay culture, or things that they quite like women doing, like, I don't know, having a facial or doing your nail, you know, go and have your nails done properly. You know, and I don't mean like having nail varnish, nail polish. I mean just having, you know, having good cuticle care, apparently.
Yeah, manicures. Yep.
Sorry.
Manicures.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, yes, I couldn't think of the term. I know, I never have them. I never have time.
Neither do I. So.
You know, but if you were a heterosexual bloke, like I've got friends who get their nails done, heterosexual blokes, but it's quite unusual, and that will be sort of part of hybrid masculinity, where they do things that, as you said, heteronormative, you know, that sort of hegemonic masculinity would never do in a million years. But the reason they do it is that perhaps they don't want to be associated with some of the difficulties of hegemonic masculinity, such as toxic masculinity, for example.
Sure. And I do want to give you credit here. So you kind of, I believe you say, basically, and actually that ties into I have notes after about Harry Styles. Hybrid masculinity is still performance art, which I couldn't have said it better myself. And then I have notes about Harry Styles, which we already talked about. So that kind of brings that full circle. So I agree that. Go ahead. Do you have to?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say something I haven't had published yet, but it's just waiting review. It's something I wrote with one of my PhD students about hybrid masculinity and SoundCloud rappers, about which I know all. I know less about that than I did about emo. I remember emo.
I know Tekashi 6ix9ine, who I very much want to profile, Joe.
Okay.
I kind of have this obsession with Tekashi 6ix9ine. He was the one who got it. I know one song. I don't think he's very good. I'm obsessed with the style and the art and the performance art of it. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. I think the music is garbage, but that's not that. I do want to bring him up.
Worst.
All right.
Yeah.
Worst.
And I know he's a very disturbing background too, with young women. But anyway, I want to. So if you have the time, I want to bring up two more things.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So one, I was very interested in, and this is getting a little more into, let's go back to toxic masculinity. And I just lost my spot here. So give me a second. Okay. So I brought up in our email exchange, Promising Young Woman.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
This movie came out last year. I very much enjoyed it. I do think, but with Carey Mulligan stars as the promising young woman. And what I think this movie shows is it kind of, at least for me, dispels with the concept of like the meathead sexual assault, kind of like, as you said, like jock, that type of male predator, or even the male predator in real positions of power, like a Harvey Weinstein. And it's more of kind of like the beta male predator. It's kind of self-effacing men. And one, I think they have a low blow against David Foster Wallace, because I love David Foster Wallace, but I think he wrote Infinite Jest, and he's kind of a controversial author. He took his own life in 2008, but he's used a lot as the bro author who, like, it's always on like women. If the man you're dating has his books on your shelf, watch out. Like, he's one of those. I think he's fantastic. But one of the characters in the show, or excuse me, in the movie, is kind of preaching about him before he makes his move on. Yeah. So anyway, I want to know, you have seen the movie, right? We talked about this. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Because it's not really the old school man in the shadows, or just the physically overtake someone. There is a little bit of that, the bro culture, especially at the end with the bachelor party, but it's more of just these kind of everyday liberal beta males in cities, like the urban liberal beta male. I want to know what you thought after seeing that.
Unfortunately, I found it really ordinary. I think the subject of the film is fantastic.
Sure.
And I think it's done really, really well. I think her death scene is one of the worst things and the most painful things I've watched in a long time. And it goes on and on. And I had to turn away a couple of times because I felt suffocated. But what I find as a woman, and being an old woman as well, is that it's very, 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 very ordinary. The kind of behaviours that I saw replicated in that film, that maybe they aren't the ordinary things we're used to seeing in films.
Yeah. I mean, they even cast, like, they even cast, like, Adam Brody, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, or Plas, I'm not sure if you pronounce it, and Bo Burnham.
Oh, yes.
I mean, these are usually actors who were cast for these roles of, like, the non-threatening male.
Yeah,
like
awkward, nerdy type guys. Yeah.
And they're three of the predators, so to speak. And I did find that, and maybe what you're saying, maybe that's why it resonated with so many people, because it's like, no, this is actually way more representative of what we have to deal with as
every
women.
day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I do want to bring that up. I don't know if you have any other notes on that, but I want to ask you.
I think it's very well done.
Yeah.
I hope if people watch it, they will think about their behaviours. But one of the things about harassment, from catcalling to what happened to the character in the film, which happens to women all the time. There's just a case in Britain now. A woman in February was walking home from her friends 9 o'clock in the evening in London. She never got home because a man who's a policeman stopped her in his car, drove her to Kent, raped her, murdered her, and left her in a forest.
Oh.
It's unusual that happens.
He was actually a policeman, or pretending to be?
No, he was a policeman. He worked for the London police. Yeah.
Oh my God. Jesus.
I'll send you the details if you like. And
Okay.
what happened with that was that was a very tip of a massive iceberg for me. I'm in my 50s. I've been harassed all my life. And one of the ways in which I'm harassed is through running. And I've run for 33 years, and I've been abused. I've had things thrown at me. I'm regularly shouted at, even with the way I look. So your pretty girls with their beautiful blonde hair bouncing up and down and looking gorgeous in shorts are also having a difficult time, but I'm having it too, which reminds me that what it is about is this kind of harassment. And you see it in the film. It's not about sex, it's about power.
Sure, yeah.
And that's what happens in that film. It becomes, it's really interesting. You say about the geeky guys, but they needed to enact power over somebody. So that's what they did. And what is interesting about that kind of harassment and then death is how ordinary it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that film does a really, really nice depiction of demonstrating how ordinary harassment is, and how difficult it is for women, but how everyday it is for men who do that. And I just wanted to say that about toxic masculinity as well. I think one of the problems about it is that lots of men felt very threatened and upset. And like, it's not all men. Like, we know it's not all men. It's not a single man that I know. I've got loads of male friends. I don't know of a single one of them who would ever call a woman out, be rude to a woman, do anything like that. They just wouldn't, because why would they?
Right.
The problem is lots of men do. And that's what we've heard, that's what we as women hear and feel. So for every, again, it happened around here. I live in a place where lots of filming goes on. It's a nice area. Last week, a young man was beaten up by homophobes down the end of my road. And the other last week as well, a woman was cornered on a path while she was running by two boys on bicycles. And she said, the things they said to me were so awful, I can't repeat them. And I'm really, really upset about them. Now they will have gone off laughing, but it will affect her and what she does.
Sure.
And what was interesting about that film, though, is that they did that with the Carey Mulligan character. You don't know whether she lived or died. And I quite like that ambiguity. I think there should be much more ambiguity in films, personally. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, ambiguity, I think, is key to good films, really. I just wanted to say, I'd seen that film, but I wanted to ask you if you'd seen
Sure.
both Moxie, have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Have a look at Moxie. And do you know about the British series called Lady Parts?
I don't think so. I don't think I've heard of that one. No.
Oh, okay. I think that's on Netflix.
Okay.
It is nuts
Okay.
because it's about British Asian women who start a punk band,
Okay. That sounds
and
cool.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. It's an amazing.
Which one's that? Lady Parts or
program.
Moxie?
It's called Lady Parts
Okay.
because that's the name of the band.
Yeah, we have to see. Also, did you say it's on Netflix?
Yeah.
Because not all Netflix there is different than Netflix
Oh,
here
is
in every
it?
country, but we still might get it. I'm just
Yeah.
You
I'm
can
sure.
probably see it on YouTube
Yeah.
if you fiddle around a bit on YouTube.
What do you think about? I'm a huge movie fan. I write what I call pocket reviews, and I'd like to get your take on my opinion. And I'm not the first one to say this, but the sex scene is gone from movies. I can't remember a film that had a sex scene that wasn't either used for comedic effect or for sexual assault or rape or something like that. I have some here. Last ones I remember, like Bridesmaids, uses it for comedic effect. Booksmart, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which is very old now. That's also for comedic effect. But like there used to be the big sex scene, and it's gone. The last movie that I remember seeing one that I watched recently, which is one of the craziest scenes I've ever seen, is in Munich. It is so awkward and weird. But the sex scene used to be a huge feature of the movie. Like people went to see, oh, this star is having sex with this star, and we have to.
Is it real? Is it fake? There was all
Right,
that
right.
as well, wasn't there?
But
I was trying to think of that film. Not Gone Girl. Ben Affleck's in it.
Gone Girl. Yeah, it's Gone Girl.
Gone Girl.
Ben
Yeah.
Affleck isn't Gone Girl. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's sex in that, but she slits Neil Patrick Harris's throat.
Yeah,
Again,
but there's a massive oral sex scene in it at the beginning with Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike.
Right.
And it's extraordinary because it goes on and on
Yeah.
and on and on.
So,
The thing is, I think that there's now one of the nice things that has happened is the idea that sex is a very everyday thing, and that everybody, if you're not thinking about it, if you're not having it, you're thinking about it, and that's very
Sure.
normal.
Right.
Rather than it being like a big deal and like the denouement of the film. Do they do it? Do they not do it? How does it go? Is it good? Did she enjoy it? Did he enjoy it? I think it's now much more every day, and I really like that because sex is really ordinary.
Yep.
And I think it should be. It should be ordinary, and
I would also say, also the accessibility
go
of
on.
pornography. I think completely changed. The accessibility of pornogaphy completely changed. So
absolutely.
it's not as, so I get that, but I don't know. I'm not nostalgic for the sex scene. I actually think a lot of times it's just like it's like, all right, let's move on already. Like we get it. They either got together, he's making a mistake, she's making a mistake, whatever it is. But I do think that cultural trends are important to study. And I was it kind of hit me, maybe, someone wrote about it a couple of years ago, and I was like, that's kind of true. Like movies don't have just the sex scene anymore. But
and are they more interesting as a consequence, or are they less interesting?
I feel like they're almost a little less interesting now.
Wait, movies or sex scenes?
There's the sex scenes.
I think a lot of them are like, it's just used for, I think, like I said, it's either comedic effect or sexual assault to show someone's evil or someone's funny. Like in Booksmart, there's always two people at a party and one gets too drunk and throws up on the other during, like that happens all the time. That was in Booksmart.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't.
Have you seen the film Destination Wedding with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder?
No,
see that one.
Is it new or old?
It's 2018.
Okay.
Oh, so it's new.
It's brilliant because here are two very unlikable characters, and the sex scene, I mean, it's not even for comedic effect.
Yeah.
It just looks like what would happen
Sure.
if you had sex in a vineyard with your tie on. With your tie on.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you know what? That's it. No, go ahead. I was gonna say it's a great segue into the next topic I want to bring up to you. Is Suits. A tie on, and you bring up Kingsman. I'm not that familiar with it, but I do know the kind of aesthetic. I know that they're fighting or they're carrying out their duty, whatever it is, in suits. I believe you say that, I don't want to misquote you, but basically suits are is it like the pinnacle of masculine fashion?
No, not fashion. No, fashion is something very different.
Okay.
Suits are the pinnacle of, they're a paradoxical item, because the president of America will wear one, and a boy going to his prom will wear one.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So they cut across race, class, and age.
Sure.
But you always know that the person wearing a suit, two-piece suit, is the person in charge, usually, and a tie, often.
Well, that's why it was such a big deal when I think it was Obama and was it Cameron, and they were at some big, and other world leaders were at a big gathering. I think it was in the UK. It might not have been, but they weren't wearing ties, and it was very scandalous that all these world leaders.
Could have been when they came to Wales.
It might have. I don't remember exactly. I mean, it was Obama, so this is a while ago now. But I know that was
him coming in.
Yeah.
Because it was the G8 summit, and they were there. Angela Merkel was there, and what is really interesting is she was in the front. Angela Merkel is the president of Germany. And it's really hard for women to dress in a way that's commensurate with the way men look in suits. Because men in suits always look good, apart from Boris Johnson, of course, which is just a whole, I mean, he completely refutes my argument. It's amazing. So I wrote that paper, and Boris comes along, and you're like, Jesus, man, I'm going to write another paper now. I'll be in the conversation again, probably. But they, at the G8 summit, which is I'm gesturing over there because I live 10 minutes from a motherfucking castle. And Obama comes in, and we literally can't leave our house because he comes in with Air Force One.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. But yes, maybe they didn't wear ties. I mean, what even are ties? What are they? One of the things I say in the talk I gave in March, which I'll send to you if you like, is I talk about the structure of men's suits and the way in which they are very derivative, and that they're always oblong or squares, and they're always straight, and they're always very, very straight. Again, apart from Boris Johnson. And ties, I mean, what are ties for? And one of the things I said sort of off the cuff in my talk, a tie is got a pointy bit at the bottom, isn't it? Yeah. I said, well, maybe it's just pointing to the penis.
Yeah.
Just showing you where it is, because it's there as well, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Honestly, I had some hilarious. Why would you do that? Why would you need to point out where the penis was? I was like, oh, cross people.
So
it was a little bit of a throwaway comment, but I was like, it's pointing down. It might be pointing.
Do you think overall, not to create it into like a binary question, but do you think the suits and their popularity, is it a good thing? Do you think that men, whether they're in power or they just want to look good, should, like, the default should be a suit?
No, I think what the suit does is point out the lack of diversity in men's clothing, which is the heart of that's what I really want to research into. And that's what I started when I was thinking about that stuff for that Matty Healy paper. Really, my argument is men's clothes are shit. And there's very little, I'm not the only person who says that.
Harry Styles says that. Sorry? Harry Styles says that in the Vogue article. Yeah.
You got that off me. And there's a guy called Jay Macaulay Bosted, who's a friend of mine. He's written about men and men's fashion. Now, men's fashion is always different from clothing. Always unequivocally.
Sure.
Okay. And what is very obvious to me is how hard it is for men to dress in a way that's remotely interesting if they want to. Even some colours are problematic for people to wear, and colours and shapes and sizes and cut, it's all awful. And I think it must be really hard for men. So I think that's why we see sort of men coming out in clothing that's in the Healy paper. I talk about Nikki Wire, who says, men's clothes are just so shit. I just wanted something nice to wear. There isn't even discourse around men's clothing that is the same as describing women's clothing as nice. There just isn't a vernacular around it. You can say, "Oh, you look sharp, dude. You look smart." You can't say anything else about men's clothes. Because it's just there just isn't any words for it. There aren't any words for it, are there?
Don't you think
it's sharp? It's hot. It's what would you say?
Go ahead, Joe. You're
oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you think that there's as much of a demand for a variety of clothing among men as it is for women, or
I think there would be. I really do. I do think there would be. And people I know just tell me all the time about how much they hate having to wear the clothes and the same clothes. I mean, lots of men are like women and wear the same thing all the time, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think if you want to express yourself sometimes, there is a lack of things you can express yourself with.
I think so. Yeah. So my notes were, in like a professional setting. Listen, I don't like wearing a suit. Sometimes I have to. I'm a lawyer, so sometimes I have to be in court with a suit. I don't like it. Usually, it's either black, blue, maybe gray. Like we're not a lot of variety. But I do think there's something for whether it's a placebo effect or not. And I know a study was done with this. I couldn't cite it if I had to, but about like doctors wearing lab coats. Like, why do doctors all wear the white lab coats? Not just to pick them out, but I think something does happen to your demeanor and to the way you think when you dress a certain way. Do you think, and when I do put on that suit and I'm going to court, which is a battle, like it is a trial or it's a battle or something like that, it does it's almost like putting on my armor. It's putting on my uniform. Do you think that there is that necessity for it in that sense?
Well, what happens when you put a suit on is that you become both three things: smart, professional, but ordinary. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that what is important is what comes out of your mouth rather than the way you look. Sure. And that's what suits do. They kind of damp a personality down, which I think is a bit problematic. Yay! We should have like a buzzer.
Or a drinking game every time you say problematic.
Oh, I'm up for that. So great. It's wine o'clock now. So we have culturally learned to be interested in how people look and read the signs of their clothing, right?
Sure.
And what a suit does is tell you, I am businesslike. Mm-hmm. And what is important is what I say, not what I look like. This is problematic. This is a massive issue for women because most people judge women on their appearances, and there is nothing women can wear that it has the same effect on them than a man's suit has on a man. There isn't any clothing for women that does that. And it's really interesting. My friend is also a lawyer in New York. And she talks about things that she has to wear to court, the things she's British as well. So she says, sometimes she's standing in court and she can hear her voice. And she's like, here I am, the Brit, talking in the American court.
That definitely helps her. That's definitely
being judged for it, though.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I don't know. We love the British accent.
Yeah, but maybe your judge doesn't love it so much.
Maybe not. Because a big thing here that's happened, and this might be very foreign to you because policing is very different in the UK. Your police don't even carry guns, which is very opposite from us. They do?
Yeah.
Oh, no, when I was there.
Now?
Oh, okay. That changed. When I was there, they did not carry guns.
When were you here?
2012. They carry guns.
There you
Now.
go.
Okay. So they carry guns. But so what happened here, if you watch like not old American movies, but movies from like the 70s, let's say you watch Dog Day Afternoon. This is the first one that comes to mind. NYPD, they're in like light blue, short sleeve shirts. They have a pistol and a hat. It's very different than how police look now, a lot of them. And there's this
pistol and a hat?
No, they have a pistol and a hat.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. No. Yeah, and they're very what we would call the beat cop, the street cop. Now, a big critique of our policing is that they look like soldiers. They're militarized because after our wars in the Middle East, all of those fun toys that we deployed over there came home.
And 9/11.
No.
Yeah. So after 9/11 and after the wars in the Middle East that we're still fighting for some reason, a lot of them, but a lot of that stuff came home, and where did it go? Well, it didn't go in garages. It went to our local police. Small towns got tanks, and it's very, very dystopian. And one of the arguments is if you train an officer like a soldier and you dress him like a soldier, don't be surprised when he acts like a soldier, not like a police officer. So again, this is kind of like the darker side to what I was bringing up with the suit. And you bring up Kingsman, where like a suit definitely is not, I've seen a little of it. It's definitely not the outfit most conducive to what they have to do. So it's almost like they're sacrificing flexibility and those sorts of things to pull off what they have to pull off for looking good. And it's very I don't know, it's very interesting to me. Same with the Secret Service. You would think the Secret Service really should be dressed in combat and like combat outfits, but they're wearing black suits and ties, right?
Yeah, like Men in Black sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's something about that suit look that is, gone across. I mean, now that is the Western look. When I like Japanese culture a lot, and that was a huge thing when the Japanese diet changed to suits. That then they became Western, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the same as well when you see African leaders who would normally be dressed in national dress and look absolutely the bomb. When they put a suit on, you're like, what are we looking at here? And it's such a shame. It's such a shame that we just don't, we don't take that national dress.
Sure.
As
I think that's changing a little. I did read something about, I think in maybe New Zealand, they have the Maori native population and like what is acceptable to wear there. And I think there's some changes being made, I think it's New Zealand, about what politicians will wear. And I think some of them are rejecting suits for more traditional dress. New Zealand
have a female prime minister though, hun, don't they?
They do.
That tells you quite about the country.
They do have female. Yeah, that's right. Did we miss? I think that's everything I have. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to bring up? I mean, we went an hour and a half, flew by. It always does.
Yeah.
I can talk, mind, honestly.
Well, we love that. That's the point of the podcast, and we're very happy you came on and you accepted our invitation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
We'd love to have you on again.
I think we're going to be Beavis and Butthead. And I was like,
I do. Oh, I wanted to bring up one more thing about movies, and this has nothing to do with, this has all to do with being Welsh. Have you seen the movie Saint Maud?
No. Is it good?
I think it's very good.
It's on my list.
It's very good. It takes place in England, but the actress is Welsh, and in it she speaks to God or not, right? I won't give anything away, but there's a deep, sonorous, awesome voice that happens at one point in the movie, and it's this really crazy sounding language. And I looked it up, and it was Welsh, and I had no idea. So you have to watch that and tell me, is that, because I've heard Welsh twice. I've heard it in that movie, and I heard it when that weatherman, I think he was, pronounced that really long Welsh name. And it went viral. So that's my relationship to the Welsh language, and I just want to know, does it always sound that cool? Because in Saint Maud is a very badass language, and I'm like, that it sounds like an ancient. It's very cool. So I actually will put, because I have the clip saved, I can actually just send it to you. But if you're gonna watch the movie, I don't want to spoil.
I've just looked her up now, and she's a Swedish-born Welsh actress.
Okay.
But it's really interesting. My children speak fluent Welsh because they go to a Welsh school, and they don't want me to speak Welsh to them. Neither me or my husband can speak Welsh because we were brought up to. But it's a very difficult language to learn and understand, I think. There's loads of good Welsh stuff. If you, again, just go on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, I just love castles and dragons, so Wales.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know Howl's Moving Dragon?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
All that stuff is based on Welsh folklore.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Cool.
Of course, yeah. Not of course, but, and also if you like.
Howl's Moving Castle?
Yeah.
Howl's Moving Castle? Yeah. Okay.
Howl's Moving Castle, yeah. Because some of the drawings are based on places in Wales and castles of Wales, because they can be very commonly seen. The other thing is, if you want to be like the coolest people ever,
Yeah.
That's the goal.
And you want a woman in your 50s telling you that, don't you? People ever. There is a fantastic band called the Super Furry Animals,
Okay.
which you won't have heard of,
Yeah.
but they've done a lot of Welsh language music that's very easy to listen to. They're very good. They're sort of like psychedelic punk rock, really nice. But they've got some Welsh language, Mung, I think one of them is. They've got Welsh language LPs that are really cool. So if it's something you're interested in and you want to listen to more of it, Ben, I would recommend Super Furry Animals Welsh language.
Yeah, I know that. I just think the Celtic languages are used to, they're still European, but they're very like exotic sounding. I know that, and there's that
compared to stupid Americans, like everything sounds exotic to us.
Because everyone knows what French and Italian and German and English sound like. So like when you hear like
romance languages.
There's a singer who does
it's Cornish.
Sure.
It's that sort of area. It's Wales, Cornwall, and Brittany.
Yeah.
And they all speak very similar. Like it's very different to Irish. Almost no relationship at all.
Yeah.
And Scottish, no relationship at all. Very, very different.
Well, there's that song. I think I listened to it to study because it's really beautiful. Gortaza Ron, and he's I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's a Brittonic or Breton singer, and it's in the movie Black Hawk Down, which is in Somalia. So you're hearing this song and you think it's like, oh, it's some like Middle Eastern, very exotic sounding music, but it's just Breton. Yeah. Very cool.
I think the extent of my knowledge of Welsh culture is mostly comes from Arthur Machen, the Victorian era horror author, Arthur Machen. Oh well, anyway, he's great. He's a huge influence on H.P. Lovecraft, and but he's great though because he did a lot of stuff. He grew up in the hills, so he was inspired by a lot of fairy tales. But he's like, no, like I want to do a horror twist where it's not all of these whimsical fairy tales. It's actually just a bunch of like degenerate inbred creatures living out in the hills, and his stuff's actually pretty disturbing. So, but
and there's a lot of mushrooms and acid in Wales.
Oh wow,
hell's yeah. Sounds like a party.
Yeah,
it really is.
All right, well, party at Ashley's place then.
Yeah.
Come on over, honestly. Are we ever allowed to? I was just looking at a job in New York. In all honesty, so I might come to you.
Excellent. Nice. We'd love to have you back on sometime. Thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for not taking the piss. Actually, I was a bit worried. I was going to be a bit defensive.
I was. So full disclosure, my first question to you was going to be, what are your thoughts on the term feminazi? But I didn't.
I just think women will never win. There's no gender equality. There's no sex equality. Women will never win. And I'm quite tired now. I'm quite tired of fighting, and it's really hard.
You can't give up the good fight.
No, right? And I've got daughters, so they growing up.
Yeah. Well.
And tell everyone where we can find you. Where to follow you. Yeah,
social media. Where to find your website.
Yeah. Now I do get a lot of trolling.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I had the mother load the other week.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Now that you've been on our podcast, we will defend you to the death. We're your knights in shining armor. I'm King Arthur, basically. There's another Welsh reference.
Knights in denim armor.
Yeah.
And I'm Morgan, of course. Morgan the whatever. Morgan the Morgana, isn't it?
I know there's some Arthurian legends. There's a character named Morgan, but
Morgan Le Fay.
Yeah.
Morgan Le Fay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we're there to protect you.
Yeah.
So
but thank you.
Yeah.
I don't need protecting, but thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it. I get a lot of fucking shit, man. There was a lot of personal stuff you said in your blog, actually, Joe, that I was going to talk to you about that was really fucking uncalled for. And being called a pink-haired feminist, overcoming feelings of oppression was really derogatory and nothing to do with the article at all. And I have a lot of that because of my appearance.
Right.
I have a lot of man-hating lesbian, and I'm like, guy, people used to say that to me in the 80s, and it's a weak argument. so don't do it again.
Hey, I won't do it again.
Either. Hmm?
I won't do it again. But I mean, to be fair, and I'm not defending what I said to you, because fair enough, that did go too far. But I mean, there are a lot of very social justice oriented people who fight pretty dirty. So for me, it was sort of like, yeah, all right, fine. Like if you're gonna call every white person a racist, if you're gonna call a black person not black because they vote conservative, then it's like, all right, fine. Like I'll join the fight and I'll fight dirty too. So, but hey, but I will say this, I have a lot of respect for you for coming on the show. You brought on a lot of really interesting and very fascinating topics here, and so this is a great conversation. I'm glad that we got to do this. And
yeah, you were both much nicer than I thought you'd be.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, no, we're happy to hear that.
For sure.
Of course.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, a big part, like even though we can be sarcastic when we're fighting a lot of the culture war stuff.
I think you're talking to the queen of sarcasm here.
Okay, yeah, that's
I also
true.
think
Yeah.
it just shows what Twitter isn't who people are, and maybe that's also everyone who's on Twitter's fault. But I think that's the point of this, because I literally, when that was happening, I said, let's have her on. Like, also, let's have her on the podcast. Perfect. And I
remember I sent you that meme with the big dragon doing the fire. I was like, yeah.
No, this is a lot of fun.
Well, this was and it was very civil. And
Yes,
I think,
and that's fine. I really like the fact you let me swear. I love that a lot.
Yeah, no,
Brilliant.
we like, yeah.
I like to have a potty mouth as much as possible, really.
Yeah, no, of course. But all right, well, thanks again for coming on our show. And
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, of course.
I'll tweet about it and make sure everybody I know
Definitely.
listens to me talking all the time.
Yeah, no, we'll send you the link. It'll probably go up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll send you the link when it's up, and we'll give it a nice promotional push. And best of luck to
See you on
and
Twitter.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And thanks again. And we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, cool.
All right.
Thank
See you
you,
guys.
Ashley.
Bye.
All right,
Take care.
bye.